Thank you for the invitation, and it's, wow, what incredible acts to follow. I'd like to, first of all, among these very techno-savvy guys, I'm going to seem really like a primitive, but to start to think about architecture in relationship with technology is part of our everyday. It's really, one can't think architecture without technology, and we design with sophisticated analytical tools and modeling tools and fabrication tools and also monitoring. And we're pushing materials to high performance levels, and we're also exploring new materials. But nevertheless, architecture remains relatively dumb. It's generally static and slow, geographically fixed, and it's integrated into legal systems and social conventions. And it's a practice which requires consensus building and lots of money and long lead times. And while architecture is in many ways behind all sorts of technological research that's happening in other fields, I actually prefer to think of architecture as a very sophisticated technology in and of itself, because it's a construct that puts other systems together, like economies and politics, and issues of culture and society. I am considered the glue here that connects lots of different practices, and I just wanted to very, very quickly just go through a couple of things that we do. We work a lot with materials that are less sturdy than typical concrete and steel, like water, mist, air, low pressure air, and as well as pushing new materials. But what I wanted to highlight here was really two interrelated projects that go in a different direction, require a different part of my brain. Sebastian, you could help me analyze what it is. And but in the past 10 years, my studio has been working on projects in New York and also some other cities, and mostly actually cities that have problems with urbanization. But New York, you think New York is really sophisticated. Well, it's got severe problems as well, namely lots of infrastructure that doesn't work. But we have been working on the High Line, which is a 1.5 mile stretch of industrial railway, which is in the meatpacking district. And just to show you a little bit, meatpacking district is here, Hudson Yards is here, and this is about 1.5 miles, and we're 2/3 of the way through this project. The way the High Line works, and we got involved in a competition to really rethink this piece of infrastructure which has gone into ruin. And this is what we found when we went up there. It was illegal to go up. It's about 30 feet in the air, and it's managed privately. And just to go into a little bit of the history, this is what you actually see from the street, so it goes right through buildings. But just very little, short bit of history. This is in the mid-1800s, and you could see a train that's going right through Manhattan, and basically that train delivered goods to this section of Manhattan. And because there were so many pedestrian and train conflicts, so many deaths, that they hired this cowboy basically to lead the train and clear the way for the train. And then in 1929, the High Line was built, and here are some blow-ups of that. So here we go. The High Line is built, and it functions to distribute goods through this part of Manhattan for about 50 years. And so, and this happened until the highway system was really developed, and at that point, this became fairly obsolete. And in the 80s, the artists started to move in. Actually, Dia Foundation found its home there. And it started to change very slowly. In the late 80s, there was a lot of pressure because this area of Manhattan was very, was very burnt out. It was very neglected. And so there was a huge amount of pressure to demolish the High Line so that the property owners that owned those properties could ultimately build new structures. And so much pressure was put on that actually 5 blocks of the High Line were demolished. There were a group of very young guys, I think I have a picture in here, of these 2 citizen activists who decided, hey, the High Line could be converted into a public park. Why don't we start? And they were naive, and that's the only reason why they were successful, was because they were naive. And one of the things they did to change public opinion, because nobody really even understood it, was to commission a photographer, Joel Sternfeld, to take photos of the High Line different seasons of the year. And okay, so this is what it looked like. These are the guys, 2 young guys that left their day jobs. Okay, this is a slight delay. So they argued for the High Line as a park, citing Central Park and the way it catalyzed development all around it. And they said that the High Line would do a similar thing. So more Sternfeld photos. Oh, I'm having a little bit of difficulty here with the control. So anyway, the last act that Giuliani had as mayor was to demolish the High Line, and those photographs were ultimately published in the New Yorker, and they had a fantastic effect. The public, for the first time, could see what the High Line was, what it could actually be. So fast forward, there was a competition, and we won that competition at the same time. There was a new mayor that came in, Mayor Bloomberg, and there was an understanding at that time that, hey, perhaps this area of Manhattan could be developed. And so they changed the zoning in this area just around the High Line to enable whatever growth was there to not impact on the light and the views of the structures that would be there, and to allow the park to actually breathe. So when we got involved in the High Line, we were just fascinated by this as a ruin, and just what actually just naturally took place there after 1980. This is kind of what grew by itself. It was self-seated, so seats that flew off of train cars, just basically were planted in this ballast, this loose ballast, and different things grew in different territories. So there was a very interesting set of ecologies, microecologies, that evolved in the whole mile and a half. And these are just a couple of different grasses that grew there, but there were over, 100 species, some native, but mostly not native, that just kind of were planted there. And so when we arrived, we just thought that this was beautiful, but how would the public use this? And I don't know about this controller. Doesn't seem to be working. Okay. So maybe I can say next if it's not working, and we could advance. Anyway, so the big question was how would the public come into this very otherworldly place? It shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be a place for humans and a place for nature. And we thought, well, maybe it could take its inspiration from these kind of natural decay cycles that happen with culture over nature, over culture over nature. And that was really the inspiration. Next, okay. So we called the strategy, and basically this was the main idea, very, very simple, called agritecture, and was a little bit of agriculture and architecture combined. And the idea was to digitize the whole surface and break it up into planting, into areas of green and areas of hardscape, and put it together. These are just very small units, put it together in different combinations to produce 100% hardscape and 100% landscape, and every combination in between. And the units look like this. They were varied. And then we added plants, so we did this with Pete Udolph and field operations. And here are just some of the plants. Now, I should say that we were very enamored of the kind of melancholia that was there. It was a sense of a kind of irretrievable past, a beauty of the irretrievable past, and also a kind of concern about the unknown future. And if we were successful, well, how would the future really look on the High Line? I'm going to show you some images, and maybe we could just go next. Next slide. Okay, and you can, next slide. And here you could see the language is very, very simple. The planking becomes the seating, the lighting is embedded in existing surfaces. Next. Okay, some more views, next. Just very simple lighting. The High Line goes right through buildings. Next. And then repurposing some industrial infrastructure for a culture of leisure. These lounge chairs, next. 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 And next. So the High Line, the site around the High Line is changing so much now that some of these shots that were taken early on of a kind of abjectness of New York, these sites are already gone, and they're already starting to be built on. Next. And one of the great things about the High Line is that there is so much that is really unexpected. And it's a space of collisions. It's a place where things just inadvertently meet. And this is really one of the fantastic things, because you're 30 feet up in the air. You're seeing New York in a way that was never intended to be seen, with blank party walls and smokestacks and mechanical car lifts and billboards. And so it's a place where you really find a different New York, a New York that New Yorkers don't even know. Okay, so we have built basically 2/3. We built about a mile of the High Line, and what happened was the notion of the High Line being a catalyst for development was we just underthought that. We didn't realize just how popular it would get. And in the end, what was an eyesore became a huge amenity, and also it escalated land prices all around it. And here are some of the buildings that are being built around, and actually since this diagram, many more. So it's really taken off. This is a portion of the High Line. It's one of the spurs across this 10th Avenue. And we did something very, very simple here. We just cut out the steel, and we put a little kind of theater seating in it, and we converted the steel plate in the front surface into glass, and created a little theater where the public can just look at 10th Avenue. And the theory here is that the reason for the popularity of the High Line is we've introduced New Yorkers to something that they don't really know, which is the idea of doing nothing. New Yorkers, like most urbanites, are always productive. If you're not at work, you're on your devices, messaging people, and or if you're at the gym, you're burning calories, and that's productive, or you're walking your dog, but you're never really doing nothing. And the great thing about the High Line is that it's a sanctioned place for nothing. And you can't really throw a ball here. You can't bring a bike. You can't bring rollerblades. Really, there's nothing you can do but walk and sit. And so this is the kind of epitome. Next slide. This one site takes doing nothing to a great height, where New Yorkers actually choose to sit here and just watch the traffic go by. And to us, it's a little bit like looking into a fireplace. It's mesmerizing. It kind of calms you down. And this is something that is, in a way, it's we're talking about making discoveries about very old things. This is the discovery of the promenade and the walk. There are all sorts of things that occurred at the High Line that we just didn't anticipate. People come there to do all sorts of things, like look at the sky, or we never anticipated yoga classes there. Have these huge dinners, mile-long dinners. This is interesting. This is off the High Line. There's a window here that was inadvertently, there was a light that was focused from the construction on one of these windows. And the person that lives on the other side is actually a cabaret singer. Next slide. Okay. She's a cabaret singer. She would come out every night at 7 o'clock, and she would perform for people on the High Line. Really crazy. Next. There she is. The Renegade Cabaret. So you can plan all the things you want, but really what happens in urban space is the unexpected, and it's even better than anything you could have imagined. Next. There's a hotel that spans the High Line. It's all glass. Next. And so people started to perform because they just started to perform there. And next. And we actually couldn't stop it. Next. But there was something incredibly consensual about it. The public liked to look, and people in the hotel liked to perform. So it's a kind of a strange thing how the High Line has become this kind of pop cultural thing that we can't, we see it everywhere on TV shows and movies and comic books. Next. Okay. Next. There's even a perfume that is named after the High Line. It's very bizarre. I don't know where the tagline is, but it says it's something like it has all the smells of urban renewal. That's okay. Next. So now we have kind of created something that we didn't realize that we were doing. High Line went viral. And now there are High Lines going up all over the world. Next. These are just some of the places. Next. And so one of those inadvertent consequences of doing something that's kind of an asset in your own city, it became this model for the saving of infrastructure in cities around the world. And in making public spaces. I mean, I think that in our technologized world, there is a deep need somehow to go back to basics at the same time, to balance one's life. And so these High Lines are really proliferating everywhere. The accidental ecosystem that we found at the beginning of the project has spawned this new ecosystem in which natives, tourists, artists, executives, socialites, club kids, cruisers, retirees, sunbathers, fitness buffs, fashionistas, and even flashers produce a new kind of bioversity that's pure New York. So maybe also this kind of beauty of the High Line that people react to is the sense of nostalgia and a sense of apprehension the past, looking at the past that we can't bring back, and looking at the apprehension of an uncertain future, full of gentrification and of higher rents now all around the site. And there is a kind of moment right now where gentrification and vacancy are in perfect balance. So I show this, and I'm going to quickly show one more project that's attached to this, as a product of citizen activism, bottom-up construction. So we didn't wait for the city to decree this a park. Two guys kind of just did it, got everybody involved, got architects involved. We went through a huge process to get the city to really understand what it means to have security 30 feet in the air, how to dispose of garbage 30 feet in the air, things that a conservative city didn't really know how to do, how to actually, without any funds, to maintain a place like this. So it was all kind of invented from scratch. Next. So very quickly, I'm going to show a project that is ground up, that we as architects invented, kind of, and proposed to the city, and now it's happening. It's at the very last third of the High Line, and on a site that is right around here. So the High Line that you just saw is coming up this way, and is coming around the yards. And so this stretch of the High Line is to the development side. So this is Hudson Yards. There will be a huge development here of over like 26 acres and 13 million square feet of mixed-use development on this part of the site. Right now, it's the East Yards. Okay, sometimes this works. So there was a very small segment of this very large development, this how high it's going to be, 21,000 square feet. And it was designated for culture. Now this happened around 2010, so the year before. It was the beginning of the economic crisis. And the city put out an RFP to ask, well, what kind of cultural institution wants to be here? Do you have any ideas? And no cultural institutions actually came forth. No one wanted to expand. No one wanted to build from scratch. There was actually very little money around. And we started to think about cultural institutions. Well, what does New York not have that it should have? And what can it do to be different from other cultural institutions in the city if it actually is ever created? And one of the most important things about this was to be able to make a financially self-sustainable new cultural institution. That is, it wouldn't be dependent on government money, which doesn't exist in America, and it wouldn't be dependent on private philanthropy, which is more the way that cultural institutions go. So that was the starting point. And then what does New York not have that it should? Next. Okay, so the location of this is right there. There's going to be the Whitney Museum is moving from uptown, right there. So this is another cultural anchor at the end of the High Line. Okay, so what New York doesn't have is an unbranded cultural institution, sort of like a Kunsthal. Every institution like the Metropolitan Museum, the Guggenheim, the Whitney, MoMA, they're strongly branded with a strong history and a strong mission. But we don't have anything that's loose that could take traveling shows, that could do big experiments. We don't have a truly multidisciplinary place where visual arts and performing arts can be together, but we added one more thing, creative industry. We don't have a building that is truly flexible in terms of its scale and in terms of adaptation of technology, and it certainly doesn't have a self-sustainable place, and we invented this idea of global timeshare. So the main idea here is that there is a base building with a shed, and the shed opens up and expands the footprint of the base building. The base building has 3 large column-free galleries. And the way that the shed moves is based on gantry crane technology, very old system, but made more contemporary. The reason why it doubles its footprint is to have small shows or extra large shows. That is, you don't have to consume a lot of space if you don't need it. So you just take it when you need it, you heat it when you need it, but also to be able to have exhibitions and at the same time have a function that can take place, that could be income producing, income generating, but also does not disturb what's happening inside of the main galleries. So in order to actually do this project, we also took on the design of this residential building, which is something that my studio was never thought that would ever do, a big commercial high-rise, but we did it in self-defense. It gave us more space for our offices and for shared infrastructure, but it also it made us make it produced a better neighbor for us. So we took on this, and okay, so this is, next slide. Okay, so in and out. And then just a word, just a couple of slides about the tower itself. You see it goes from square to cloverleaf. It goes from rental to condos. Next. And next. And it's just, you know, most buildings have bases or tops. This building has a middle. It has a corset. And it goes through that translation of geometry. Now, I should say that this was an incredible project for us to be involved in because we were able to, and totally different clients and totally kind of related but unrelated. We're doing an urban park for New York. We're doing a new cultural institution that we had invented that was really a startup. And we're doing a residential tower for the developer of the site. So we were able to do an ensemble and actually think about it all together. Next. So this little animation is now looking from the north, and you could see the shed. It docks into the tall building. And then in 15 minutes, it can deploy, and all the guillotine doors can come up, and it could be open air. And so we imagine having lots of different kinds of programming where we can have thermally controlled events inside and exhibitions, but also events that are open air and free to the public, the whole range of things. Next. Okay, this is the basic programming structure, which is it produces, co-produces, and it presents all different types of exhibitions and performances. And then it has income-generating events, and they're all related to creative industry, and then all the things in between. So it's kind of unabashedly a kind of mix of culture and commerce, and usually one apologizes for the other. Many cultural institutions have to take money from commercial sources, but we do that unapologetically because we are bringing up the level of the commercial stuff that's shown, and it is all creative industry based. So you can see all the different modalities of the culture shed, and with a program that's very complex, four-dimensional program, it's very, very rarely ever private. It's mostly public, and often public and free. Next. Okay, and then these are just some views. Next. The gallery. Next. And then the shed itself. ETFE pillows. Fashion Week. Next. Performances, all sorts of spectacles that could take place. Next. And then it could be opened up as a farmer's market. Next. Skating rink, or many other functions that could be seasonal. Next. And when the shed is nested, also has a very large space, the one that it covers, that could also be open air for concerts. Next. And then to the north, also there's a very large space that's conducive for concerts as well. So the New York Philharmonic, for example, could play indoors, and the public can pay for a ticket, and there could be broadcast outside. Public can witness in real time, but 5,000, 7,000 people can watch. And so this is the last slide, and I would just end by saying that both of these projects are really conceived ground-up projects, and for us as architects, we're very used to inheriting projects. There's a need, you get hired, and you execute your project on time and on the budget, hopefully, and you contribute in some way to the culture of architecture along the way. That's always been our goal. But we had never thought until recently about being able to be part of policy making and to put things on the table that actually cities will never think of, and administrations will never think about. So this project now is a 501c3, which is a tax-exempt organization that is a cultural organization, so it has a federal status now. It now has all the legal permissions to be deploying onto a site that is actually not, was not granted as part of the cultural site. So we went through all sorts of zoning actions and legal actions to be able to make that happen. The city was very, very supportive of this project and helped us on the legal front, and also to start up the fundraising that it needs to do the capital campaign to get this built. And at the same time, we're working with artists and curators and museum directors and festival directors and people from creative industry to really preconceive this program, because in a sense, we were very opportunistic. The site was there, the ability to build something was there. We wanted to capture the possibility and to do something that has a certain flexibility before there was actually ever an institution. So usually architecture follows from a program. Here, architecture actually instigated a new program that was never conceived for New York. And as we show this project in different parts of the world, we see that actually it's an idea that that seems to be somewhat infectious, and many cities are saying, well, why don't we have one of those of our own? So that's all I have, and thank you.
Thank you, Liz. And can you guys join me on stage?